Dr. Dutch with the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for outreach and support.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're joining us. Welcome to this week's episode of NACHOS, the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for outreach and support. I am your host, Dr. Adam Dutch Hazlett, and today is Memorial Day, May 26th. And before we begin, I want to hold a space for what this day often brings, which is reflection, remembrance, and sometimes, most oftentimes, conflict. Because when we think of freedom, many of us picture it in red, white, or blue, and we think about sacrifice. We think about service. We think about the Psalm. We think about the 11th hour. We think about World War I, World War II, something like that, about flags folded at ceremonies and parades that roll down Main Street. But here at NACHOS, we know that freedom isn't just a matter of national identity. It's deeply personal. It's in our bodies. It's in our choices. It's in our voices. And it's in our care. So today I want to start with a quote from Franklin Delano Roosevelt, someone who knew a thing or two about limitation and perseverance. And he said, quote, "In the truest sense, freedom cannot be bestowed. It must be achieved." Now, if you don't know, Roosevelt, 32nd president, longest serving, he lived with polio and he used a wheelchair much of his adult life, although he went to great lengths to conceal his identity. His quote reminds us that true freedom, real embodied liberation, isn't something that someone gives us. It's something we grow into, and it's something that we claim. And for many of us in the neurodivergent and disabled communities, that is the work. Not just surviving systems that were never built for us, but slowly, radically reshaping our relationship with freedom, with rest, with self-worth, with the stories we were told about what we could or couldn't do. So on this Memorial Day, we're not just remembering those who served, we're honoring the quiet revolutions we live every day. The hard-won freedom to stim in public, to ask for accommodations without apology, to unmask in safe spaces, to say no to burnout, and yes to joy. Now let's stay with that idea a little longer. The idea that freedom is not something handed to us, but something we cultivate. Not in a grand gesture, but in subtle, often invisible work. The invisible work of becoming. The work of unlearning what the world told us we had to be. Of relearning how to listen to ourselves. Of choosing presence over perfection. Stimming over silence. And rest over running on fumes. And in that spirit, I want to take us from the metaphor of liberation to something happening deep within our literal minds. Something that shows just how interconnected this work of freedom really is. A new study published this week out of UC Berkeley caught my attention, not just because of what it discovered, but because of what it affirms. Our brains are not static. They grow, they adapt, they become. Researchers examine the tiny grooves in the brain, right? The tertiary sulci, these small folds that show up on the surface of the cerebral cortex. These grooves, they found, may play a surprisingly powerful role in how efficiently different parts of the brain communicate with each other. Specifically, the study linked the deeper sulci with stronger cognitive networks and better reasoning abilities in children and teens. So why does this matter? Because it challenges that outdated idea that intelligence or mental capacity is fixed at birth. Instead, this research supports a more dynamic view that the brain's very shape can reflect how we process information, solve problems, and adapt to new situations. And these changes aren't just a product of age. They're shaped by how we engage with the world, what we learn, and how we move through stress and connect to all of that interplay. And I'll tell you, that to me is where it all clicks. Because of those of us navigating life as neurodivergent humans, we're often told our brains are broken. We're pathologized, marginalized, or pressured to conform to a norm that we never fit in the first place. But this study reminds us that our brain is not a blueprint, it's a garden. It shifts, it stretches, it makes new paths. It's neuroplasticity in action, not just as biological phenomenon, but as a metaphor for hope, for possibility, for becoming. When we talk about building a neuro-affirming life here on Nachos, we're not just talking about affirmations and accommodations. We're talking about liberation at the cellular level. We're talking about how moments of play, rest, creativity, and connection can literally shape our brains towards resilience and clarity. So today on Memorial Day, a day often marked by solemn remembrance, we can also choose to remember this. Freedom is found in the everyday, in your growth, in your writing, in the way that you honor your needs, the way that you show up for your community, and slowly, lovingly, patiently, gently, the way you rewire your own story and your own self. You're not broken. You are becoming. Remember that. That's what matters. Now, when we talk about this brain structure and how it can influence cognitive and reasoning abilities, this kind of insight underscores the dynamic nature of neural architecture and how its capacity is ultimately for growth and adaptation. But if we build upon this and we look at what researchers at the University of Tokyo have identified as intriguing parallels between the behavior of large language learning models like ChatGPT and a human language disorder known as Wernicke's aphasia. Now, in Wernicke's aphasia, individuals can produce fluent speech that lacks meaningful content, a phenomenon mirrored in how LLMs sometimes generate confident yet nonsensical responses. The researchers employed a technique called energy landscape analysis to compare patterns of brain activity in individuals with aphasia to the individual signal patterns of LLMs. They discovered that both systems exhibit similar dynamics, where signals can become trapped in shallow energy states, leading to disorganized output. This resemblance offers potential avenues for improving AI systems and developing more nuanced diagnostic tools for language disorders. I mean, it really is an intersection of neuroscience and artificial intelligence, and it highlights the complexity of communication and the importance for context and coherence. It reminds us that fluency alone does not equate to understanding, and that's a concept that resonates deeply here at Nachos. In our pursuit of neuro-affirming practices, we recognize that meaningful communication involves more than just the ability to speak or write fluently. It encompasses the capacity to convey thoughts and emotions authentically and to be understood by others. To know that our behavior can be seen as communication and that the person in the moment is patient enough to read that behavior as communication. It encompasses that capacity to convey thoughts and emotions authentically, right? And to be understood by others. And this research reinforces the value of creating environments where individuals feel safe to express themselves without the pressure to conform to those conventional standards of communication. Now, as we reflect on these insights, let's continue to honor the diverse ways in which we process and experience information by embracing our unique cognitive landscapes. We move closer to achieving personal freedom that comes with self-understanding and acceptance. All of this our brain's physical structure, our capacity for authentic expression, and the surprising overlap between human communication disorders and artificial intelligence leads us to a foundational question in both technology and philosophy. What does it mean to think? Now, in 1950, British mathematician and logician Alan Turing proposed a now famous thought experiment to help us explore that very question. It became known as the Turing test. The premise was deceptively simple. If a computer could engage in a text-based conversation with a human, and that human couldn't tell whether they were speaking with a machine or a person, then the machine could be said to exhibit, quote, intelligence. But the deeper purpose of the Turing test wasn't to prove that machines were sentient. Turing's real genius was in shifting the question of what intelligence is, in an abstract and slippery notion, to how we recognize it. He grounded the philosophical in the relational. In essence, he said, if you can't tell the difference in the conversation, maybe the difference matters less than we think. And here's where this ties directly to NACHOS and to the neuro-affirming lens we bring in everything we do. So many of us, especially autistic, ADHD, and otherwise neurodivergent folks, have been judged not by the content of our thoughts, but by the packaging of our words. We've been dismissed for speaking too much or too little, for info dumping or scripting, for performing fluently the way that society expects, or for absolutely dropping the ball on that, not performing fluently at all. And that's why in this classroom and in this podcast and in this place, we're not just studying AI for its technological marvels. We're using it as a mirror, as a way to ask what kind of communication gets valued, what kind of mind gets recognized as intelligent, and how can we create spaces, academically, professionally, and personally, where authenticity matters more than polish. So as you work on your assignment, your Turing assignment, I hope you reflect not only on the science, but on the bigger questions too. The ones that challenge us to make room for the different kinds of brilliance. The ones that ask, what does it mean to listen? Really, really listen to someone whose wiring doesn't match yours. And what might you learn if you did? If you'd like feedback for your thoughts and reflections, remember, turn in your assignments by the deadline, and I will give you feedback. I'll be reading them with care, not just for the content, but for the courage it takes to think differently and to write or present that film from a place of curiosity and growth. Now let's talk for a moment about how your assignments will be evaluated. And I want to be absolutely clear, you are not being graded on production value. This is not a film contest or a performance. You don't need flashy edits, background music, or fancy graphics. What matters most in all of your projects for me is in how you engage with the questions that are at the heart of the assignment. I'm looking for your thought process, your ability to wrestle with the ideas of consciousness, communication, authenticity, intelligence, really the questions of who are you at the core, at the foundation. And this is a space for your critical thinking to shine, not for you to mimic someone else's definition of polish or perfection. So be you, do you. You will be rewarded for taking the risk. You do need to include an audiovisual component in everything that you do. This helps us think about the relational, sensory nature of communication in a digital age, but you are absolutely allowed to remain off camera. Some of you may choose to narrate over slides, show art or imagery while speaking, or present audio with a simple visual backdrop. That's entirely fine. The goal isn't to see you. It's to hear how you're engaging with the ideas in a meaningful, reflective, and curious way. If you need help thinking through the format of ideas or whatever, reach out. That's part of the process too. We're not here to prove we have all the answers. We're here to learn how to ask better questions and how to do it in a way that affirms your voice, your brain, and your way of showing up in the world. You've got this. So let's keep going. We've been talking a lot about how our brains learn, adapt, and grow, from the grooves that shape communication in our mind to how language disorders mirror artificial intelligence quirks. We've been peeling back layers on what it means to think and connect. But let's shift now to a different kind of intelligence, social intelligence. And a surprising new experiment that might just help us understand human connection in a new and fresh way. They always tell us it's going to be a new and fresh way. In a recent study out of the University of Surrey and the University of Hamburg, scientists created a new kind of simulation for social robots. And yes, robots that interact with people. The goal here, to help these robots learn how to predict what a person might look next, or where a person might look next in a conversation. Basically, to predict the next point of conversation. Usually, to teach a robot something like that, researchers need to bring a bunch of human participants, track their eye movement in real time, and gather loads of data. And that's time-consuming and expensive. But this team found a workaround. They built a computer model, a sort of smart guesser, that mimics how human eyes naturally move around in a conversation. For example, if you're talking to someone and they suddenly glance behind you, your eyes probably follow. If they gesture to something with their hands, you shift your attention there. We think about babies, right? Cognitive, milestones and whatnot. Now, this model was designed to simulate those kinds of social behaviors without needing a real person in the room to test it. And here's the amazing part. It worked. The robot could use the model to practice responding to where a person might look, anticipate attention shifts, and fine-tune its ability to act more socially aware. It's like giving a robot a dress rehearsal for human interaction. So you go to motion. I shuffle my papers in class. The robot now knows class is over. But let's bring this back to us and not just the robots. What this study really underscores is in how much communication is unspoken. Eye contact, glances, shifts in attention, subtle, sometimes automatic moves are part of how we connect as humans. It's a dance we do, even if we don't always consciously realize that we're dancing. For many of us in the neurodivergent community, these unspoken expectations, these unseen dance moves, can feel confusing or exhausting. Sometimes they're downright inaccessible. It's like dancing to Stairway to Heaven. So the fact that the researchers are trying to help machines understand these patterns, it's a reminder of how complex and sometimes invisible human interaction truly is. And so here's the NACHOS connection. Just because someone doesn't follow traditional gaze patterns or neurotypical social cues doesn't mean they're disconnected. It means they communicate differently. It means that their attention flows in ways that you don't understand always and that don't align with the script, but they're still valid and they very much are deeply, deeply human. And as we move towards a world that includes AI, robots, and increasingly digital forms of communication, let's hold on to that truth. Let's remember, ultimately, that communication is more than mimicry. It starts off that way, but the connection is more than eye contact. And if we think about freedom, real, lived, neuro-affirming freedom, it's the ability to be seen and heard for who you are, not how closely you match someone else's model. And so if we keep listening and keep unlearning, we can keep becoming. And so when we look at what we talked about with University of Hamburg and how they developed a simulation model, right? And it allowed us to look at how robots anticipate. They even did this in Bern and in Geneva. They examined whether AI systems could navigate emotionally charged situations with appropriate responses. They subjected 6 large models, ChatGPT-4, Claude 3.5, Haiku, to emotional intelligence assessments commonly used in both research and corporate settings. And the results were striking. AI models achieved an average of accuracy of 82% on these tests, outperforming human participants in emotional intelligence. The computers average 82. Does anybody want to guess what the humans average? Type your guess right now in the chat. Type it. Humans, computers, 82% efficient at emotional intelligence. Humans, type your number. It's 1 to 100. 82 are the computers. Where do humans rank? All right, I expect that you've typed it in there now. 56%. Humans have an emotional intelligence score of 56%, and the damn Chat GPT is more emotionally intelligent than us. Furthermore, ChatGPT-4 demonstrated the ability to generate new, reliable EI assessments rapidly, a process that traditionally takes years to develop. And so this development prompts us to reflect on the nature of how emotional intelligence and its role in human AI interactions can truly work. While AI can process and respond to emotional cues effectively, it's essential to consider the depth of understanding and empathy that underpins genuine human connections, or maybe the lack thereof. As we integrate AI into various aspects of society, from education to healthcare, we must ensure that these technologies complement rather than replace our subpar emotional understanding that defines our substandard emotional relationships. If we foster environments where AI can support us, maybe we'll get better. We could harness this technology while preserving our authenticity, and we could actually enhance human connection. That's the whole point of technology, not to replace, but to complement, enhance, and make better. And I truly believe that we could do that. We've talked about this on this program. We've talked about how AI has been used in therapeutic spaces with like statistical efficacy, measurable, positive outcomes. And it's pretty wild to think about, right? That these machines, that lines of code and silicone logic are now scoring higher on emotional intelligence assessments than most of us. But before we jump to conclusions and start worrying about, Terminators and Skynet, let's pause and think about what this actually means. Emotional intelligence at its core isn't just about recognizing emotions. It's about knowing what to do with them once we've recognized them.
Take out your trash cans.
It's about responding with care. It's about adjusting tone and language to meet someone where they are and showing that you're attuned not just to what they say, but how they feel. The fact that AI models can mimic us well enough to pass standardized tests, it's remarkable. But it also tells us something else, that maybe the way we've defined emotional intelligence, going back to Alan Turing, maybe it's too narrow. Maybe it's too surface level, and maybe it's too easy to fake. So here at NACHOS, we hold a space for a different kind of emotional intelligence. One rooted in lived experience, self-awareness, and community care. For many neurodivergent people, emotional expression may not look typical. You might not mirror facial expressions the way others expect. You might miss a social cue, but feel a situational's kind of emotional temperature in your bones. Or maybe you script your way through conflict because you care deeply not because you don't. The rise of emotionally smart AI invites us to ask, are we measuring empathy by the right metrics? If a robot can simulate care but can't feel, what does that say about how we recognize care in each other? At NACHOS, we believe that emotional intelligence isn't just about getting answers right on a test. It's about showing up with your full, ugly, happily, beautifully true, full self. With all the awkward pauses, sensory overloads, hard-won boundaries, and willingness to repair that comes with it. And that's the kind of intelligence that builds community, true community. That's the kind of intelligence that no machine can truly replicate. So even as AI gets better at simulating what it sounds like to be us, let's not forget how powerful it is to feel the presence of someone who really sees you, who cares, who cries with you, who laughs with you. Not as a data point, but as a whole complex, growing, and living human being sitting right next to you. Let's keep choosing the kind of intelligence that liberates, not just impresses. Let's keep choosing connection. And when we look at all the stories we've explored today, from the grooves in our brains to the gaze of social robots, from the mirrored confusion of aphasia and AI to the emotional fluency of language models, it seems like we're jumping between widely different worlds: biology, psychology, engineering, ethics. But if you step back, you take a wider, maybe deeper look, it comes into focus. Every story that we've talked about today is about human communication, how it's built, how it's broken, and how we try to make sense of it. Whether it's the way our brains fold and twirl and spin, and how those shapes fix or change how we reason, or the way in which a robot tries to predict where we will go based upon our eyes, or how AI learns to feel emotions, even though it cannot experience any of those emotions. The question beneath it all is this: how do we understand each other? And that's where this nacho theme comes in loud and clear. Because communication isn't about fluency or form. It's not about eye contact or verbal polish or acing an emotional intelligence test. It's about access, and it's about presence. It's about finding ways to meet each other across differences, especially when that difference is neurological, sensory, or deeply personal. That's the real work of being human. For neurodivergent folks, we spent a lifetime adapting to norms that weren't made for us, learning how to mask, how to script, and how to survive misunderstanding. And these stories remind us that even machines now mimic what we've had to perform. But Nachos is about something more radical: unmasking, reclaiming, redefining. And mainly redefining what counts as intelligence, what counts as connection, what counts as care, what it means to be human, fully human. Every one of these scientific breakthroughs, remarkable as they are, also reflects something many of us have known all along. Minds are diverse. It's not rocket science. Everyone thinks differently. Boom. That's what we've known all along. We know that connection isn't a one-size-fits all. Freedom, the kind that, FDR talked about at the beginning, it's not something that you're handed. It's something that you have to grow into and then ultimately take. One accommodation, one truth-telling, one reclaimed sense of self at a time. So as we close out this episode, I invite you to see these stories not as cold facts of technological curiosities, but as windows. Windows into how much more is possible when we start listening differently. When we design differently. When we start living differently. That's what we're trying to build here at NACHOS. Not just knowledge, but knowing. Not just access, but belonging. Not just awareness, but affirmation. It's a process. It's not a destination. If you're still with us, thank you. These conversations aren't always easy, but they're necessary. And if something in today's episode stirred something inside you, a thought, a question, a moment of resonance, I hope you'll keep coming here, hanging out with us, walking with us, talking with us, learning with us. Because Humanities 101 isn't just a podcast. It isn't just a YouTube project. It's a community of learners, of dreamers, of neurodivergent creatives, of everyday folks trying to make sense of a world that doesn't often make sense of or make space for our wiring and make sense for us. And you're welcome here. Whether you speak up in our Discord, you listen quietly in your car, you come to an event that we have in person, or you just sit back with your hoodie up, with your headphones on, you're still part of this. You're still a part of this. If you haven't yet, you can subscribe to Humanities 101 on YouTube. Check out our upcoming events on our website or join the Discord server where conversations continue in real time. It's a space built on care, curiosity, and consent, and we'd love to have you with us. Everything we talked about today, the shifting science, the personal truths, the hopes that have been woven through uncertainty, those aren't just podcast topics. They're invitations to connect, to explore, and to ultimately be seen. So if you're looking for a space that lets you show up just as you are, not as you're expected to be, the space is for you. Come be a part of it. Be a part of what we're building and upcoming events, new resources, and community threads on our website and our Discord. We'd love for you to join the conversation, however that looks for you. So whether you're curled up on the couch, driving home from work, or paused in the middle of a long day, I want you to take a breath with me. Let's remember, your brain is not broken. It's beautifully alive, growing, adapting, and learning in ways even the most advanced machines cannot replicate. Whether your thoughts are fast or foggy, whether you speak through words, art, silence, or stimming, you are communicating something real, something that matters. You are allowed to take up space even if you take your time. You are allowed to feel deeply even if the world rewards performance over presence. You are allowed to build your life around your wiring, not in spite of it. Because you are not a machine. You are not built to run without stopping. You are not meant to operate flawlessly or endlessly without feeling. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy. You don't need to be efficient to be valuable. You don't need to keep going just because the world refuses to pause. Self-care, then, is more than maintenance. It's resistance. It's remembering that being human means having limits. And honoring those limits is not failure. It's human wisdom. It's divine grace. Machines might pass tests, generate scripts, They might simulate connection, but only you can feel. Only you can rest. Only you can choose presence over performance, wholeness over hustle. Only you can choose no. So as you move back into your day, carry this with you. You are not behind. You are not too much. You are not less than. You are not a machine. You are a gloriously, beautifully, brilliantly, stupidly optimistic human. And that is more than enough. So until next time, stay soft, stay curious, and stay grounded in the messy, meaningful magic of being exactly who you are. And we'll see you real soon.